Okay, so Dr. Reg, I learned that you were also a caregiver while you were a college student. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Leah, I sure can. I mean, it's kind of an interesting story. This was a guy that I met when I was in college as an undergraduate, and I was in the School of Nursing at the time. And he was a quadriplegic. He had broken his neck diving into a lake where he lived in Idaho. And he broke his neck and he was paralyzed from about the chest down, is what he experienced. And he had use of his arms, but his hands were contracted. So he could move a thumb kind of just a small amount. But what he would do is the contractures actually helped him to pick up a fork or pick up a cup. He could wrap his fingers around it and he could feed himself. The only thing I had to help him with was to cut his meat. But otherwise he could feed himself, etc. He was in a doctoral program in psychology is what he was working on. And so I would sometimes push him in his wheelchair to a class, but most of what he was doing was working on his dissertation. So he was at his room and I would help him get up in the morning and help him get to bed at night. Well, one fun story is that one night I was just falling asleep and the phone rings and it's Roger. And he said, "Could you come down and help me pick this thing up?" And I thought, oh, good Lord. First, I'm tired. I want to go to bed. I'm just falling asleep. So I kind of, grumble, go down to his room. And literally, he could lean over in his chair, which he could do, and pick it up himself. So I looked at him and I said, "Roger," I said, "for crying out loud, you can pick this up yourself." And he looked at me and he got mad. And he says, "Why can't you help me?" And I said, "Because you're not an invalid." And he then reached over and grabbed it. So that started a whole thing that I would push him to do things. I would never push him beyond what he was capable of, but I always push him up to the edge. And I think that's important in caregiving, is that you really do kind of encourage the patient to do what they can do, but not something that they're incapable of doing or can't do. And that's certainly what I did. So one other example of caring for him is that, now remember, he was between high school and college. He had a football scholarship that he was going to, but broke his neck in between his senior year and college. So he didn't get to go to college under the football scholarship. So he's a big guy, and pushing him around was not easy for me, but I did it. And it was amazing of what we would do. And so in any event, one of the things that I did with him is that I decided that I thought it might be useful to create more independence for him, is to teach him how to drive. Because he drove when he was in high school, but ever since he was injured, he had never driven. So a friend of mine came over. We had some hand apparatus that we could attach to the car. He had bought an old Buick that we called Moby Dick because it had the rounded fenders and it looked just like Moby Dick. And so that's what we called the car. So he bought this car so that I could take him around to see places that he had never been before. So this friend of mine, we installed handbrakes into this car. So I literally took him to a parking lot at the university when on a weekend when the lot was just empty, and just had him practice, braking, doing whatever. And he got the idea. So we decided, okay, we're going to go on the road. So we go down what's in Salt Lake is called 4th Avenue. And 4th Avenue, it kind of goes straight, but then it curves and it goes down a hill. And so he's driving, and it's sort of like 4 p.m, rush hour is starting to build, and there's cars all over the place, and he's going pretty slow. People are honking, what have you. But I said, just keep driving. You're doing fine. And then his speed started picking up. And I thought, oh, good Lord, what's going on? And all of a sudden, I realized he's pushing the handbrake and it isn't working. Ah, good Lord, we were scared out of our wits. So luckily, I'm in a car that has a bucket seat. I'm sorry, not bucket, a bench seat. And the bench seat made it so I could reach over and grab the emergency brake and pull it on. And by gosh, it slowed the car down. So I was literally pulling the brake on, letting it go, pulling it on, having him drive. At the bottom of the hill was a gas station. We drove in there. They put it up on the lift to find out that the brake lines had rusted through and lost all the brake fluid. So no wonder he didn't have any brakes. Whew! If you don't think that spooked him, I don't know what would, but it sure did. And but that whole experience made it so that he eventually ended up buying a van that he could actually take his wheelchair right in and drive, and he did that. So that little bit of what I did for him involved him into doing more for himself, which was such a neat thing that happened in his life. And he was forever grateful for what I did for him. And it was such a neat experience. And we really became very, very close friends. And, I miss him even to this day, that he was such a neat guy. So that's a little of the story of the guy that I took care of.
Wow.
Had really, he was a quadriplegic and quite paralyzed.
Wow. That is such a special experience, a special bond that you got to have. Thank you for sharing.
It really was.